Close your eyes and picture the Baltic Sea on a winter night. Steel grey water, air so cold it bites, and somewhere out there, a radar screen lights up with a contact that wasn't there a second ago. A few minutes later, a pair of Gripens roar along a darkened highway, refueled from a truck, their tyres still dusted with road gravel. On Gotland, Home Guard companies snap to readiness, while a Patriot battery quietly slews its radar to a new bearing. This is Sweden in 2025. No longer the quiet neighbour, but NATO's newly arrived porcupine, small on a map, bristling with quills, and absolutely ready to make any bite hurt. So how insanely powerful is the Swedish military right now, and what's coming? The short answer: powerful enough to punch far above its weight today, and on track to hit a much heavier class by 2030. The longer answer is where it gets fun, because the numbers, the tech, and the geography add up to something uniquely Scandinavian. A force built for speed, dispersion, electronic warfare, and the kind of icy resolve that makes an invader's logistics officer cry into their spreadsheets. For transparency, everything you're hearing is current to late October 2025. Let's start with the big picture. Sweden is in the middle of its largest military buildup since the Cold War, now as NATO's 32nd member. In 2025, the government funded 138 billion Swedish kroner for the armed forces, and in its 2025 to 2030 defense decision, it mapped out more than 170 billion Swedish kroner in additional funding through the end of the decade. For 2026, the plan takes a leg up again to roughly 175 billion Swedish kroner, about 2.8% of GDP. Part of a glide path toward 3.5% on core defense later in the decade. That's not Nordic minimalism, that's Nordic rearmament. People, not just platforms, are the heart of this surge. Sweden is expanding from roughly 88,000 wartime positions toward about 115,000 by 2030. That wartime headcount includes professionals, conscripts, civilians, and the Home Guard. To get there, Stockholm is scaling conscription. Think around 8,000 in 2025, heading for at least 10,000 annually by 2030, and roughly 12,000 per year between 2032 and 2035. In other words, the pipeline is widening and the force is thickening. Here's where that manpower goes. The government's defense resolution aims for 4 brigades in all essential parts by 2030. Picture 3 mechanized brigades as the armored hammer, plus a light brigade as the fast, distributed scalpel for archipelago and urban fights, all under a reconstituted divisional framework. The Home Guard, meanwhile, anchors Sweden's territorial defense with about 22,000 personnel, local, fast to mobilize, and hard to surprise. Now that's the plan. The reality check is healthy. Building brigades takes time. You need officers, NCOs, mechanics, medics, comms techs. Training a brigade staff is not a speed run. Parliament and the ministry are candid that timelines rub against long lead times, price creep, and industry delivery risk. Translation: the 4 brigade goal is doable, but it lives and dies on sustained funding, throughput in training, and industry staying on schedule. Okay, let's put teeth on this. On land, Sweden's armoured tip is getting sharper. After donating some Leopard 2s to Ukraine, Stockholm signed for 44 new Leopard 2 A8s and upgrades to 66 existing tanks, bringing the future fleet to around 154 Stridsvagn 123 variants by 2031. The infantry punch remains the CV-90, a proven Nordic brawler that Sweden continues to modernize, while coordinating new buys with neighbours to compress timelines and standardize kit. And the artillery backbone is the Archer, arguably Europe's best shoot-and-scoot howitzer, supported by a massive multi-year ammunition buy to ensure sustained volume fires. If a lesson from Ukraine came through loud and clear, it's this: survivors move fast and keep shooting. Sweden took that to heart. Air defense is the other big land domain storyline. Sweden fielded 4 Patriot fire units, Luftwaffe System 103, with PAC-3 MSE interceptors for the high end. Think ballistic and cruise missile defense. In June 2025, Stockholm added 7 Iris-T SLM medium-range systems for Brigades and Gotland, stitching a layered shield over maneuver forces and key points. If you've watched Ukrainian skies, you know why Sweden is doubling down here. And drones? Everyone's favourite buzzword now has Swedish receipts. In October 2025, the government carved out over 5 billion Swedish kroner, with 3.5 billion Swedish kroner fast-tracked for counter-UAS between 2026 and 2028, dragging deliveries forward by 8 years. Meanwhile, Sweden and Saab have been trialling drone swarm tech under NATO exercise conditions. Swarms for recon, queuing and deception, paired with jammers, shooters and better base defense. Again, that's Ukraine's hard school, turned into Swedish procurement. Shift to the Air Force. Because Sweden's air game is where the dispersion magic really happens. In late October 2025, the Swedish Air Force accepted its first Gripen E, opening a transition towards 60 new-build E models, while retaining a sizable Gripen C/D fleet during overlap. Gripen isn't a hangar queen. It's designed for highway basing and quick turnarounds, tossing meteors and standoff weapons from rough strips under a web of mobile radars. Add the long-range eye of GlobalEye AEW and C, Sweden has been growing that fleet, and you get an air picture that's fast, resilient, and nasty to penetrate. The enabler story keeps improving. In October 2025, Stockholm signed for 4 Embraer C390 tactical transports, with the first jet expected to arrive by the end of 2027. That's a modern backbone for lift, moving HIMARS-class payloads, sling-loading archipelago gear, or dumping pallets of munitions onto a highway base in bad weather. It's the unsexy piece that makes everything else possible. There's also a quiet revolution overhead. Sweden slipped its first military communications satellite, GNA-3, into orbit in August 2024, and has since been stitching together partnerships for SAR imagery and geospatial intelligence. Think Saab teaming with ISI and Maxar, while FMV funds native launch capability at S-Range in Kiruna. Put simply, Swedish C2 is going space native, in line with NATO's needs. And that's going to make the Baltic battle space even less friendly for an aggressor. Time to get wet. Baltic wet. The Swedish Navy is lean, stealthy, and getting new hulls plus torpedoes, radars, and boats. The Visby Corvettes are receiving midlife upgrades to keep their stealth bite, and the future surface combatant, the Luleå-class heavy corvette, aims to start appearing around 2030, with 4 hulls planned into the mid-2030s. Ambition is high. Better air defense, better ASW, better endurance. The flip side, the schedule is tight, and design choices have been in motion. Defense officials have openly discussed alternatives to keep timelines realistic. Welcome to shipbuilding, where the sea is calm and the Gantt charts are not. Under the surface, Sweden's A-26 Blekinge-class submarines are coming, but later than hoped. Current planning points to deliveries around 2031 and 2033. That's frustrating, but the payoff is serious. Some of the most advanced non-nuclear subs on Earth, designed for the Baltic's shallow, cluttered acoustics. Until then, the legacy boats keep watch, and Sweden's torpedo and mine warfare game, already a regional strength, covers gaps. Now, numbers without comparisons are just numbers. So, where does Sweden sit? On Global Firepower's 2025 list, Sweden ranks 27th overall and tops the Scandinavian sub-ranking ahead of Norway, Denmark and Finland. Another index, Military Power Rankings, MPR, puts Sweden 32nd. These aren't gospel, but they're a useful yardstick. Small population, high-end kit, and a regional role that matters disproportionately because of geography, industry, and now NATO integration. And geography is destiny. Sweden plus Finland effectively turned the Baltic into NATO's interior sea. That makes Gotland look like what it is, an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the middle of the Baltic shipping lanes. The Army's light forces, IRST brigades and Home Guard on the island, paired with allied air and sea power, can complicate any attempt to isolate the Baltics. In fact, allied exercises have increasingly rehearsed precisely that: rapid insertion of long-range fires and air defense onto Gotland to hold the far shore at risk. Let's zoom in on how Sweden fights, because capability is more than line items. First, dispersion. The classic BAS-90 doctrine, flying and rearming from road bases, never died. It just got modern. Sweden fields the equipment, procedures and culture to spread out fast. Second, speed. Archer throws a mission, moves and lives. CV-90s and Leopards maneuver under a long envelope of radars and shooters. Third, electronic warfare and sensing. The Global Eye plus ground radars create a layered detection grid. Satellites add another plane of awareness, and counter-UAS moves from a program to a posture, with fielded jammers and shooters folding into base security as standard practice. Put it together and you get a joint force built to survive the opening salvos, blind the attacker, and return fire with precision. What about gaps? Sweden is honest about them. Officers and specialists, especially at the NCO level, are a pacing item. Training throughput is expanding, but you can't fast-forward experience. Rocket artillery is a known shortfall the government has flagged for action. Expect HIMARS-class capabilities to re-enter the toolbox this decade, aligned to NATO needs and exercises that have already tested concepts on Swedish soil. The Navy's modernization cadence, Luleå class in the early 2030s, A-26 sliding right, creates a near-term window where careful maintenance and incremental upgrades must carry the load. And industry? It's booming, but everyone in Europe is buying at once. Lead times and supply chains will test patience. The other half of power is resilience. Sweden's totalförsvar, total defense, means military, civil, and industrial pieces lock together. The Psychological Defense Agency counters disinformation and political subversion. The National Cybersecurity Center and FRA underpins cyber and signals resilience. The civil side handles shelters, continuity of government, and the lifelines, energy, transport, comms, that keep brigades and bases humming. NATO membership puts those hard-won Swedish habits into an alliance framework that expects contested logistics and hybrid harassment from day one. Industry is the accelerant. FMV placed about 68 billion Swedish kroner in new orders in 2024 alone, triple the volume from 2021, and projects roughly 475 billion Swedish kroner over the coming decade. That translates into Archer shells by the millions, new combat boats for the archipelago, IRIS-T brigades, C-390 airlifters, Leopard upgrades, and yet more Global Eye. For Sweden's high-tech base, Saab, BAE Hägglunds, Nammo and others, that means jobs, R&D and export leverage. For the force, it means the kit arriving in time to matter. And you can see Ukraine's fingerprints on almost every decision. More air defense, more ammo, more mobility, more drones, and more ways to kill them. The Swedish toolbox is being shaped by a war fought under satellites, over social media, and amid a sky full of cheap quadcopters that can ruin $1 million day. The lesson isn't buy one wonder weapon, it's survive the first punch, keep moving, and keep killing. Sweden is building for that fight. Let's pull it all together with a simple thought experiment. Imagine an aggressor testing NATO's resolve in the Baltic. Within hours, Sweden disperses its air force to highway strips and secondary bases. Global Eye picks up launches. Patriot and IRIS-T shape the air corridor. Counter-UAS bubbles form around bases and ports. On Gotland, the Light Brigade links up with Home Guard companies, while ferries, C-390s, and allied lift-flow precision fires and sensors across the Baltic scene. On the mainland, mechanized brigades grind forward behind an artillery plan that never pauses, because the shell stocks are deep and the guns live. Meanwhile, someone in Kiruna is tasking a Swedish satellite for a fresh look at a rail junction, and a Gripen E rips down a frosty road to launch a meteor into a fight it refuses to lose. Is Sweden already insanely powerful? Against its mission, deter, defend, and make the Baltic a no-fun zone for an invader? Yes. It's not a superpower, and it doesn't have to be. It's a specialist in a deadly environment, with tools tailored to the job and an industrial base that's back in the fight. By 2030, with 4 brigades largely complete, wartime strength around 115,000, the Gripen E-Force spun up, layered air defenses mature, new Corvettes sliding down the ways, and A-26 boats finally hitting the water, Sweden becomes something more. The Nordic hinge of NATO's northern front, able to anchor the alliance's plan from the Arctic to the Baltic. The only thing insane, then, will be the decision to test it. And for quick international context, Sweden ranks 27th on Global Firepower's 2025 list, and 32nd on Military Power Rankings 2025. Again, not gospel, but useful pins in the map. They'll probably underestimate a nation that practices landing fighter jets on country roads, which is, let's admit, a very Swedish way to cheat on the test. So, how insanely powerful is the Swedish military? Powerful enough that the smarter question isn't, can Sweden fight? It's, who would be reckless enough to make it prove it?